Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone, the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, I'm excited because today the roles are reversed. Usually you're the guy that's been out on adventures, but today, or at least for this episode, I'm the one who went on an adventure earlier this week, so I get to share my experiences.
I have to say, I'm pretty jealous. Looked like a pretty cool experience. You got to see and check out on the ground, and I saw a lot of people posting about it. So definitely keen to hear more about what you heard, what you saw, maybe what you learned along the way.
Well, before we do that, Nick, I have a brief story to tell that would have almost thrown this entire episode into the void. And if it had ended a different way, I would not be sharing this story. At the moment, Steve McCaskill, our technology head, and Will Tubbs are the only two people that know this because they were at the event with me. Our video producer, Dana, when he edits this in about 30 minutes, is going to be very upset with me. Manny, our multimedia director, is going to have something to say to me. So I went to Sky Sports on Tuesday, went to the studios, did an interview with Gary Hughes, who's the director of football. The day before that interview, I had to go to the Sports Pro offices and pick up all the multimedia equipment, so multiple phones, multiple microphones, all these different things, probably a couple $1,000s worth of, equipment. So I'm taking the tube home. I'm on the DLR and very crowded, so I had to put stuff underneath the seat, including my backpack and including this bag of stuff. So I get off the DLR, I'm walking up to my house, and about 10 minutes in, I'm like, oh shit, I've forgotten the recording stuff. So I sprint back down. Fortunately, there's a lady working there. I'm like, hey, about 15 minutes ago, I let this bag on here. Like, I know it's a 1 in a million shot being in London. Is there any chance someone's found it? So she starts bringing out her phone, starts calling people on her walkie-talkie. And then about 10 minutes later, she looks at me and she's like, what's in the bag? I was like, it's a black drawstring bag. There's 2 iPhones. There's 2 this, blah, 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 blah. She's all right. We found it. I was just like, oh my God.
Wow.
So shout out to Anne-Marie and Nadine working for the TFL on the DLR in particular. They're
massive listeners of the pod. Definitely big listeners of the pod.
Yeah. They're like, the DLR train's currently a Poplar. It's going to be an hour until it gets back. She's like, love, there's a pub just around the corner. Go sit down, have a pint, relax, and I'll have it for you in an hour. So I went, had a pint, came back. So yeah, I wouldn't have shared that story if story had gone otherwise. Don't know what I would have done with the interview, but it's all worked itself out, and we're going to have something to talk about today.
It's nice to hear good stories of things actually being handed back, because you obviously hear a lot of negativity, particularly in London of late, with things getting stolen and so forth. I've heard some bad stories of friends in the time. So nice to hear that was resolved, and no wonder it didn't get mentioned to me because it was all resolved prior to that message having to make its way to Sweden. But good to hear that it all worked out in the end. So that's amazing.
So we did. It worked out. I had a bird take a shit on me while I was walking my dog the day before, and I'm told that is supposed to be good luck. So I'm assuming that is that good luck that rolled over.
Scientifically proven that.
Yeah, scientifically proven. So we're back on. I came back from Sky Sports Studios, gave the equipment to Dan, and immediately said, I no longer want the responsibility. I'll explain later. And he's going to find out when he edits his podcast.
Oh, that's hilarious. I think even better that Dano is going to find out by listening into this. Well, it's either there's really good luck or bad things happen in threes. So it was going to be one way or the other. So
good luck it is.
That all worked out.
So now that we've gone over there, because I had to share the story, I had the opportunity to go out to Sky's campus on Tuesday. They were hosting a preseason Premier League kickoff event, a little bit of setting the scene. These are some of the things we accomplished last year, and these are some of the new things we're going to roll out this year. All the senior leaders were there. Jonathan Litch, the managing director of Sky Sports. I may have messed up his job title there, but he's the top dog when it comes to Sky Sports. I mentioned Gary Hughes.
Chief Sports Officer is Jonathan Litch.
Chief Sports Officer. There you go.
Yeah, I love that. Well, it's one of just Chief of
Sports. It's a great title. Great title.
Particularly of Sky Sports. Like if it was Chief Sports Officer of Sky, would get it, but I think it says Chief Sports Officer of Sky Sports. That's a bit of a mouthful. I'm not going to try that 3 times fast.
We had Gary Hughes, who I interviewed, and you'll hear from later in this episode, the director of football. Also had sort of the head of product there, kind of talking about some of the new features, the Sky OS system, Sky Glass, and rolled out some of the features there. And then Steve Alford, who's the director of Sky Sports News. Basically, they all gave a rundown of different things that you can expect this year. And even though she didn't speak, the group CEO of Sky was there. So, big dog in the house. And they also had Micah Richards, Gary Neville, and Jamie Carragher. They're head talent when it comes to commentary. We're all there to do a separate session. Got to go into the actual studios where they recorded everything. I don't think anybody will be shocked to hear. Really incredible experience, very professional. Everything was super well done. And given it was probably one of the hottest days of the year, thankfully the air conditioning was on super high blast, which they say is intentional because of all the lights. It gets really hot in there. So yeah, it was really good. Lots of things going on. Have you ever been to the Sky campus before?
What do they call it? It's like it's known as Skyberia because it's so far away.
That's what Steve said.
Else. Yeah. No, I haven't. I've driven past it before, and I've always been intrigued to see what it's like. You just don't know with studio setups like that. You know, we've been to like Turner Studios in the US, and sometimes it's just a big lot. Sometimes it's like no frills, and other times you can go to a place like that, and it's a really impressive setting or somewhere in between. So no, I haven't had the chance to go out there. I've always wondered what it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I only saw a small portion of the campus because the sports section's kind of got its own dedicated building and studios. But obviously, Sky is not only just broadcaster, they have the whole telecoms business. So there's different areas there, the research and development center. So I only got to see the one small portion of it, but like, I think there's something like over 5,000 people on that campus in terms of how many people are working there. So yeah, it was really impressive. Everyone there, super professional, super well-spoken. So yeah, it was just today, this is actually going to be a bonus pod. The Premier League kicks off on Friday, August 15th. That's when this pod will kick off. So just a little bit of a preview on things you can expect from a Sky Sports perspective, because they did share some numbers, and those that hadn't been following, it is going to be kind of a monumental year for Sky, at least in terms of the sheer amount of content they're going to be delivering this year.
Yeah, it's a super interesting time for a number of reasons around what the Premier League's doing. It's the new rights cycle kickoff, and with Sky is the primary partner for that, and to see how they bring all that content to life, because obviously one of the big things, and we've talked about it before, but for those that are new to it, is the UK is so unique with its 3 p.m. blackout that it has for all those games. And what they've done as a result of a couple of reasons, but what they've done is they've moved loads of games off the EPL calendar and schedule out of that 3 p.m. slot to make them available through Sky, mainly through Sky, out of all partners, which completely transforms the ability to watch the Premier League than where it was 4 years ago, and also might be a precursor to that inevitable blackout being taken away, or the 3 p.m. blackout inevitably being taken away, depending on how you want to phrase that. So it is a really interesting point in time in the history and the relationship between Sky and the Premier League and the Premier League itself, because just all built around this blackout situation more than anything.
Yeah, well, in terms of just kicking things off, the big number to come up with this in the new deal is they are going from broadcasting 128 games to a minimum of 215 games. So you're talking about quite a significant increase in games. And the reason I say minimum, and this feeds into some other things, is that historically, those that don't follow football, if a team is playing in a European fixture in the midweek, the Premier League won't force them to go play on the Saturday because there's not enough turnaround time. So those games, had they historically been scheduled on Saturday, they've been quote unquote displaced into the Sunday schedule, and then were just never shown on TV because of the way, the broadcasters get to select games. Those games just aren't in the pool. This year, those displaced games will all now be shown on what they call, it's Super Sunday, but they kind of jokingly called it Super Size Sunday, because now all of a sudden you could have 4 to 5 games kicked off in that 2:30 window on a Sunday that historically never would have been there before. So that's why it's 215 with an asterisk, because that's just the minimum. That number could go up, and we'll kind of see where that ends up depending on how many European games get displaced from the Saturday schedule.
Really interesting that they've done that. I don't think I've ever seen a contract or set of terms with one of these major rights deals that has that flexibility in it built into it because of this X factor with the 3 p.m. blackout, whereas those games could be not broadcast at all, or they could be sitting in this multi-game window. It's interesting you brought that up, because obviously one of the things that they did talk about and show was the fact they are going to have a multi-view experience made available, which you're probably going to talk about. But I was wondering at the time, like, why does that matter? Because, you almost never have a game going against another matchup. But this is obviously where it can come to life.
And that's exactly it. They talk about the introduction of multi-view this year. Gary speaks about it with me later on as well. And they almost refer to it as an NFL Red Zone Light. Obviously, the packages are a little bit different in the sense of football's stop and go. You can more easily go in and out, where football's a little bit more fluid. But They also won't have someone like a Scott Hansen that's going to be a singular voice kind of going back and forth. It'll be pulling in the audio and the commentary from each individual games, and they'll have someone that will see, hey, if there's a penalty kick up, we need to bring this up on the big screen. So it's not going to be an apples to apples remake of the Red Zone, but it's going to be a very similar package where either you have the choice to go across the multiple different Sky channels and focus on one game, or you can have the option to do the multi-view. So yeah, that's exactly where they're going to roll that package out, is on the Sundays when they have those displaced games, which we know inevitably that is going to happen given how many Premier League teams happen to feature, whether that's Champions League, Europa Conference, and so on.
Who do you think should be the Scott Hansen of the Premier League if they were going to do one in the UK? And which could be really viable next cycle if those caveats come into place. So they release 3 p.m., remove the 3 p.m. blackout, or they put more games back into that slot. Who do you think will be best placed?
Best placed, or who I'd be most entertained by?
Oh, both. Give us either or. I'll take either. I've got no idea. To be honest, I've got absolutely no idea.
Probably Roy Keane, just because he's just hilarious. Just to hear him just kind of yelling and giving his thing. So like he my favorite, just because like I just find him to be hilarious, even though I think it is intentional. He also does a really good job of delivering it in an unintentional way.
I can't remember the guy's name. This is probably a more boring answer. Well, I'll give you a boring answer and a more entertaining answer. Oh, the entertaining answer would be Micah Richards, because I just think he'd be absolutely all over the place and it'd be quite comical. He'd just bring the energy any time something was happening. The two obvious ones that stand out are Jeff Stelling, who does Super Saturday or did Super Saturday. I don't know who does it anymore. I've not watched it in years. And obviously Gary Lineker with his Match of the Day background would be an absolute professional step into that, just as long as they've got the depending on what rights and stuff are available. But I don't think that's good. We won't see that happens. Let's see if that happens anytime soon. I've never seen the MLS version of
neither have I.
That. And I think I would love to see some video of that. If anyone has access to that or has a clip somewhere that they are listening, please send it across. Otherwise, I might have to do some searching after this.
Yeah. So that's going to be rolled out as a new product. One of the other things that they were talking about from a product perspective that I think is interesting, not that it's necessarily groundbreaking, but it's good to see them introduce, is they'll now have features if you show up late that you can start from the beginning so you don't miss anything. But the other thing they said they were going to commit to is having full game replays available within minutes of the match finishing, which I've spoken about before. For me, with DAZN and NFL Game Pass, one of the biggest features for me is having access to full game replays. So the fact that they said that they're going to commit to that and, kind of do it, they said really within minutes of a game finishing, I think it's just a nice feature. Particularly they used a great example for parents who are going to be busy on a weekend, something like that, being able to have that replayability. It's a little thing, but I think it is something from a viewer perspective, it is really positive. And then the other thing worth mentioning, we know Amazon is no longer doing the Christmas coverage that they used to do around Boxing Day, which is obviously a very jam-packed schedule. They don't have exclusivity over the games around the festive period, but they do have the return of Boxing Day and other games around there. So you're going to see more footage or more coverage around that period. So that's always, I think, been a nice block of time to have. And obviously, they'll also be driving people to the World Darts Championship. So it's just sort of continuing to house more and more content around that festive period. And also, it'll be the first time match week 38. For those that don't know, the last game of week of the season of the Premier League, all games kick off at the same exact time, so that way you can't sort of try to strategically play your way into the final spots. They're actually going to broadcast all those games individually, and you're going to be able to choose which game you want to watch, and that'll be a first-time feature, which, I think would be great for everybody, just given how crazy that is to think that there's that many games played and only one of them is going to be featured. Now you can watch any game you want on the last game week.
Sounds interesting. Definitely making a lot of changes from season to season by the sounds of it. So it'll be interesting how they can pull this off. 215 games is extraordinary number to be made available through primary broadcast production. That's the thing. Like sometimes more games are available and sometimes it's lost on people. But to have that full breadth of broadcast, the Sky Sports touch on those broadcasts, it means it's a pretty major investment. And that's probably why Sky was able to push back on also on the EPL, which is what I expected to have happened, and not pay a correlated increase in media rights fees, because they're going to have to put a lot into production on this. I think one of the interesting things now with this change is my theory is that Sky didn't really want or need more games to their package and to their offering. because they had the core, they had the what do you call the core rate, the majority share. So if you are a football fan, you will buy Sky Sports in that market, no question. But more games probably wouldn't lead to more subscriptions for them. They had such a strong hold of that. So now that they are opening up all these games and adding all these extra investments into producing more ways of interacting with it, I'm just curious to see how much actual impact it can have with subscriber numbers. Normally, if you saw a broadcaster take on so much more content, you would do it under the guise of we would expect an uplift in subscriptions and so forth. But here, I don't think it's really under the same guise.
Well, interesting. That question did come up and Jonathan Litch did answer it, which was basically around there. And he explicitly said Sky is a growth business when asked, is the acquisition of all these rights about retaining existing customers or is it about trying to attract more subscribers? And he explicitly said Sky is a growth business and we are looking to grow the business and we see football as a core part of our strategy to do so. And that's not to, he didn't say that as a way to negate the impact of retention, but he was also very clear on saying like this is a growth business and what they're trying to achieve.
Well, it makes sense now because I think what would have taken some time for them to work out with the EPL is the right mix. Because now by moving so many games out of that 3 p.m. slot, it also means that more games will be available in non-traditional windows, which means that those fans are perhaps always season ticket holders to Championship, League One, League Two competitions, teams might also have a higher interest in buying subscriptions now because they are able to watch more games and have access to more games than they were in the past. So I don't think there's a subscription uptick play here, but they haven't had to invest a lot from a rights perspective to have that opportunity. Instead, they've made investments in perhaps adding more interactivity, more value to a subscriber.
Well, speaking of that, we've talked about the uptick of Premier League games. It's actually nothing in comparison to the uptick in games from the ELF, which is the Championship, League One, League Two, which they're going to show over 1,000 games this year from the EFL. And at minimum, each team will be featured at least 20 times. So there's going to be, talking about that value add to make sure everyone's going to get an opportunity to be able to watch their teams. Not all this will necessarily be on Sky. Part of it will be on Sky Sports Plus, which is the app that they launched last year. And they said really positive statistics on last year where they said 75% of all Sky Sports subscribers also stream content via Sky Sports Plus. So I thought that was an interesting statistic to talk about consumer behavior in terms of how they're doing that. There's also going to be 90% of WSL games are going to be shown. So in total, they're looking at showing around 1,500 football matches this year between the Premier League, Scottish Premier League, EFL, and the WSL.
That is a pretty extraordinary number. Blows me away. I'm not sure if we go down a segue here, but I was thinking about this. I was going to write something about this in some stage, but I was thinking after this ESPN NFL deal, like who else would possibly be someone that this type of deal could come about with, and it's got to be Sky and EPL. Like their success and failure, particularly in the UK, is all so synergized together that if the 3 p.m. blackout is removed, I could definitely see a play like that happening and playing out because they're already proving themselves that Sky can deliver at scale, to the scale that is unrivaled probably in the world for the amount of matches. So interesting to see what happens with that. But cool, wow, that's a big number.
Yeah, and speaking of the 3 p.m. blackout, the question really, or the comment came more around piracy, just the threat that exists out there. And Jonathan Litch spoke about, we do know the 3 p.m. game is a more attractive option for pirates to be involved because it's simply just not available. And there was mentioned multiple times, even Gary and Micah mentioned it when they were just talking about football, but it got brought up, you can go to the U.S. and watch every single game and whether that needs to change. Now, I didn't take the comment as they're explicitly going to make the 3 p.m. games all of a sudden broadcastable. I don't know if that's a word, but more of they've talked about we're going to put more games on Friday, more games on Monday. So I don't know if it's necessarily, this is just completely me kind of having to think, is less about opening up that window and more about potentially shifting around the schedule a little bit.
Well, I think it's important to delineate. I'm not exactly sure who's actually responsible for that, but it's not Sky and it's not the EPL either. Yeah. It is a regulation that's in place preventing that. So even if they want it, doesn't mean they'll get it anyway. Although I think where we're at today now, it has to be done at some stage, and the sooner the better for, I would have thought, most parties. Now, the challenge again to Sky, from Sky's point of view, is they don't really have much benefit for themselves to open up that floodgate, particularly if those rights are therefore made available to buy for anyone, because that just dilutes the value of their current rights package. If we think they're at a relative critical mass of subscribers, they're not going to get meaningful value out of it. And they would hate to have another competitor come up and mop up those 3 p.m. rights. So that's the tricky balance, that Sky won't want it, and they're paying billions for the rights to the EPL. The EPL has to be conscious about upsetting the apple cart too much with their main partner. So Sky's in the driver's seat there, and we've seen they've been in the driver's seat with a lot of different types of negotiations and partnerships in the past, that they won't be in a rush to make that move. But I can imagine the EPL would probably want to do it if they knew that they could see a correlated uptick in revenue and engagement, etc. So inevitably, it must have some impact to Sky's subscription numbers if people know they can get it through pirated means, surely.
100%, but that's also part of the reason between the uptick in games available, not just at the Premier League level, at all other lower levels, having the new Super Sunday with the multi-view option to just try to make as much available as possible. And one of the other things that I thought was interesting that they brought up, Nick, a couple of different people brought up in different angles, and given we just talked about sort of renting or owning your audience and YouTube, things like that, Jonathan Lynch mentioned it's a big point of emphasis for them to grow their youth audiences, as everyone's trying to do. They've talked about they've seen their broadcast numbers in terms of viewership almost double over the last 4 years for under 35s in the UK. But one statistic you did brought up was not just what they're doing on broadcast, but also on YouTube. I'm assuming the statistic comes from usage in the UK, but they've said they're the number one sports publisher on YouTube, reaching 5 million under 35s every month. So I'm imagining most of the other stats were UK focused, but I thought the fact that they felt the need to make that a point of emphasis, they're talking about some of the other bits. And then Mark Alford from Sky Sports News talked about, it was a really high number, Nick. It was something like 2/3 of all mentions of the Premier League on Twitter included the handle Sky Sports News, which I'm sure has to be people are quote tweeting things, responding to things. It was a really high number. And I think it goes to talk about sort of this renting versus owning. Does everything have to be on your own platform? It seems like Sky is very comfortable with saying, we know there's stuff happening off our platform that we want to be around, particularly for those younger audiences.
Oh, that's some very interesting numbers there. Nice work, Chris. I would say the whole youth thing, I think it's always a bit of a metric that keeps getting talked about for different reasons. Like a broadcaster wants to show that they're reaching younger audiences from an advertiser perspective. They want to show that they are viable and relevant to all sorts of different potential consumer brands to work with. And also monetization through YouTube. You can sell ads directly to platform. So I know that many broadcasters are looking at actually monetizing YouTube more effectively now by actually selling direct to advertisers, not just through their own channels. So that might be why they're talking a bit about that in that sort of setting, I would imagine. Yeah.
And then the last bit, just to flesh it out, because it's not just all about live sports, and we talk about some of the stuff there on social. Sky Sports News is expanding their coverage. There's going to be the introduction of new shows. They're going to take place across the week. One of those includes the Premier League Friday show, which will be hosted by Roman Kemp. Those that don't know, a famous radio DJ for Capital FM. So definitely comes from a different football background, but I think that is also intentionally part of the strategy of attracting a newer, younger audience. They're also introducing a Sky Sports Fan Club TV show where they're now going to have content creators from all the different clubs. Basically, I think they now have a content creator from all 20 clubs that'll be able to come on, give feedback. So again, this is more this creator-led approach, and they're also partnered with a company called Finalysis, which is basically a platform people can engage directly with, give player rankings, give confidence ratings on the manager's decisions. And some of that feedback from Finalysis is going to be brought into some of those different shows. So even they're trying to flesh out what they do on the non-game days, and they're taking a little bit different approach with some new hosts that don't necessarily haven't historically always been, in the mainstream broadcast for sports, and then bringing in this Finalysis app along with the fan club show, changing up some of the content they're doing. So it's, as much as it's easy to focus on the sheer amount of games that are being covered, they've also made a total recommitment to the amount of coverage that they're going to do, the different types of content they're going to do throughout the week. So they're going all in. Let's put it that way.
They sure are. Wow. Great work, mate. That's a lot of good insight packed into about 20 minutes there before we jump into the conversation that you had on the ground. I think what I'm really interested to see just how things evolve, not only from Sky's perspective, but also what we see other teams do, the teams themselves, whether they do continue to grow on platforms like YouTube and other social media channels and double down on that. I saw some interesting stats the day from WC Sport in a report that they produced, and obviously they are helping clubs, teams, rights holders, publishers, etc., create content. And there's something like a 76% jump in vertical videos year on year. Like, that's an extraordinary number, and nearly 1 million videos generated around the EPL coverage for those that have rights to it. So there seems like a huge increase and boost in that non-live array of content also being generated at the same time. So with all that, alongside this extra exposure of more matches, lead to a real big increase in fandom, because you think Premier League, it's pretty much the pinnacle of fandom in many countries in terms of how it's followed. Can it go even further with all this extra content being pumped out, or is that just correlated with what expectations are for audiences these days? Like, is the expectation there is just more?
Yeah, well, I didn't get the statistic written down, but they did also mention your point, new vertical highlights, because they talked about, we know our users do not like to flip the phone sideways. So they've even talked about this year they're going to introduce more vertical video highlights. So it was all included in there. And like you say, after this, we're going to hand things over to myself with an interview with Gary Hughes as the director of football. We kind of talk about the relationship, particularly in this last round of negotiations, sort of, was it Sky or was it the Premier League pushing to have more games? How collaborative is that approach? Who really wanted the games out there? We talk about their improved coverage and investment in the WSL. You and I spoke about it the other day, their move to that noon Sunday slot. Gary gives his view in terms of how they worked with the league to do that. Talk about Sky Sports Plus and just a general overview of what you're going to see from Sky this year in terms of that new agreement going forward. So I was really glad Gary was able to take some time out to speak to us, and hopefully it'll give you more direct insights from Sky themselves. I'm very excited to be joined by Gary Hughes, the director of football for Sky Sports. And where I actually want to start, Gary.
Hi, Chris.
I know I have some business questions.
Okay.
But for me, just on a day-to-day work basis, how exciting is it to be able to, this is my first time ever at the Sky Sports studio, so how invigorating is it to get to walk in and see the studio? Because I imagine you're a football fan, so just being able to sit in there every day.
It's pretty special. I've been at Sky for 30 years now. Worked in Sky News, Sky Sports News, and now doing the role I am in Sky Sports Football, having produced some live football before, Champions League and some Premier League, and some of our shoulder programmes as well, back in the day of Sunday Supplement, Goals on Sunday, etc. So I've been here a fair few years, but I still get a buzz every day I walk in the building. Obviously, the campus has evolved, like sport has evolved, like the Premier League has evolved, like our rights deals have evolved. But yeah, it's a fantastic place to work. Lots of good energy. Obviously, the football team are full of football fans, and we have great debates and every day around who's going to be signing for who and who's going to win what. And it's just a really good, energetic place to work. And I hope you got that sense coming to Sky for the first time today.
100%, totally got that vibe. And it's just wasn't on my list of questions, but it's just the sort of thing that when you're here, it's a bit infectious. So just kind of wanted to hear firsthand how your experiences were, just being able to walk in day to day. Because we always talk business, but we don't always talk about some of the more just enjoying life sort of things. The classic, it's not work if you enjoy what you do thing, right?
Exactly. And I love my work, so there we go.
Awesome. So today we managed, there was a presentation from you and different members of the team. Also got to hear from some of the key talent. Really big summer, really big season upcoming. As we're recording this, it's Tuesday before the kickoff on Friday. One of the big things from Sky Sports is the expanded coverage of the Premier League. And you went through some of the statistics, the increase. We're looking at a minimum 215 games this year. Just talk about that process, what it means for Sky to really sort of further establish, I should say, its dominance in the UK as being the number one broadcaster for sports.
I'm glad you were listening and mentioned the minimum 215. Exactly. Listen, I think this is it's our biggest ever Premier League deal. 215 games minimum of going into next season. It's a 4-year deal, which is different to other cycles, which have always been 3. So it gives us that opportunity to really plan, and that extra year does make a big difference. What it does do, the 4-year Premier League deal, it sort of aligns all our football. So we've got a 4-year deal with the Premier League starting this Friday, as you say. We've got 4 years left of our 5-year EFL deal. We've got 4 years left of our 5-year SPFL deal, and we've also got a new WSL deal as well. I think what what our strategy has been and where we've been very successful in recent years is locking down the key rights, the ones that are important to us, up until the end of the decade. So obviously all those football rights are locked in alongside F1, ECB cricket. We've got long-term tennis rights and other cricket rights as well. So what it does mean, it gives customers that level of security and knowledge that for the next 4 years they're going to be able to watch all these great events live on Sky Sports. And I think what the Premier League deal does for us is, again, underline our position as the domestic home of football. We've got all those games. I think within the presentation, I think it was over 1,500 games we'll show next season, which is huge. And if you're a football fan, Sky Sports for domestic football, for Premier League, for EFL, for Scottish football, men's and women's, and the WSL is the place to be.
Absolutely, and I think what would be interesting is talking about that Premier League deal. It's a partnership that has obviously been very beneficial for both sides.
Yeah.
I think the Premier League would be right to credit Sky Sports for its global growth, not just domestically, but what it's been able to do in terms of building that. When you're having that conversation, just be curious with the expansion of the coverage. Is that something that you guys are working on mutually, talking about expanding the coverage? Is that something you're pushing for, the Premier League's pushing for? Like, how does the collaborative nature of that tender process work in terms of expanding that coverage?
So we've been, as I said in the presentation earlier, we've been sort of partners with the Premier League since a whole new ball game back in 1992, when the offering back then was just 60 games. We were exclusive partners for 15 years, and we've been the lead partner ever since. And as I said earlier in the presentation, our games have grown year on year. I think, and Gary Neville was in the presentation earlier, or was doing a punditry session. He was saying you go around the world and all Premier League games are available. Now, clearly we have the 3 p.m. Saturday blackout here, which is Article 48, which is tradition and which we respect. And I think what the Premier League did, it was their decision. Ultimately, it's their rights, it's their tender. And they will look at what they think is the right thing to do in this 4-year cycle. They looked at extending it for an extra year. And what they have done is made all those 2 o'clock games available. So, again, the guys were talking around the 2 o'clock game that might be live on the television. There'll be 3 other games happening at that time. And it feels as though you're missing out. I don't think you feel that on a Saturday at 3 o'clock because it's tradition in this country. So I think, the EFL, again, led the way on this by their inventory is massive. I think it's 1,881 games. And we were only showing 160 odd of those matches a season, and we had some good dialogue with them. And again, it's their inventory, it's their tender. But what they would do with their rights, they wanted more of that shown. So much so that we now show, I think it's 1,059, but I think with displaced matches it was well over 1,100 last year. So the volume is increasing all the time. All the governing bodies want more of their sport on more of the channels. And the Premier League have got, the biggest and best inventory. It's the best sporting league in the world. And to have us having 215 and maybe a total of around 270, around 280, I think is a big sea change and a step forward. And it'd be interesting to see, and it's ultimately, again, up to them. We have regular dialogue. We've got a great relationship with the Premier League. As I said, we've been partners for 33 years. We talk to them about a lot of stuff. We talk to them about access. I'm in regular contact with them around fixtures and scheduling. It is a partnership. Ultimately, they will always decide. We will talk to them as being their lead partner about certain issues. But what I think it does is just, again, underline that fact that, and it's the same with the WSL, our new deal with them, all 132 games are going to be live. So that is a direction of travel for all rights. And I think the Premier League have made a really good decision this year and this cycle going to the volumes that they have.
Yeah. One question I didn't necessarily prepare for, but I saw it in your presentation. I think it's really interesting because for us as a podcast, we have started to extend more digital media, not just explicitly linear broadcast or OTT. You referenced some statistics around the growth of your YouTube channels, and in particular the Gen Z audience you guys have been able to capture. So for me, just be curious, when you're having those conversations from a rights perspective, you've obviously got the live rights, but sort of how you view also having access to the digital rights, because that seems like I imagine you wouldn't have wanted to share that statistic if there wasn't a story behind it.
No, absolutely. In my role as director of football, I'm in charge of the television coverage of what we do. But obviously, we work very closely with the digital team, and clearly, in any rights negotiation, the way that it all set up at the moment, it is linear. It's television first, but then digital is becoming so much more important. So we would, very rarely, and we would always want to do a rights deal where the digital rights are attached to that as well. And we have got those clip rights. Digital's massively important for us. That new audience is massively important for us. We've got a lot of focus on under 35s, how we can reach, how we can talk to, how we can become more relevant to under 35s as a Sky Sports brand, and how they would consider buying and upgrading or working, on some of our products. Now TV, how they become a subscriber and a customer of Sky. So that's a huge focus for us. And I think what we've tried to do as well, we've tried to evolve our offering on television, on screen. We've got a much younger, more diverse, more relevant pundit lineup than we ever have done before. And I think some of the stuff we get around our access, what we're trying to do is, again, go out and really engage with the young players of today, get them talking about themselves, their lifestyle, and putting stuff social first, digital first. Yeah. That's a lot of what we're doing around our access, and then teasing it in the linear coverage and promoting our digital outlets as well. So, it's a whole ecosystem that in any rights deal across any sport we do, both the live rights and the digital rights are massively important.
Yeah, and I imagine that does sit with Mark and his team. He gave the presentation from the Sky Sports perspective, but like you said, that's all linked together. And just the fact that you mentioned in your presentation, I just thought it was worth mentioning.
Our teams are constantly working together about how we can best utilize our content, best utilize what assets we've got across all platforms.
Yeah. Now, you referenced that this is a complete football strategy. This isn't just limited to the Premier League. It obviously gets the big billing, but you referenced some of the other leagues, and in particular, looking at the WSL, you guys have made further investment financially, as well as your extended coverage of the amount of games. You talked about, I think it's 90% of games are going to be covered. But additionally, as well, a specific strategy change is the Sunday afternoon kickoff spot, moving that. Is it noon or is it 12:30?
Noon, 12 o'clock,
Talk about sort of that, using the WSL as part of the overall football strategy, and then particularly that decision as a way how you think that's going to help promote the growth of the league.
So the WSL is not just part of the football strategy, it's part of our women's sports strategy. We want to be, and I think we are known for our, being the leading broadcaster of women's sport. We've had some incredible women's sports rights, golf, netball, cricket for a long time. We're now into the first year of 5, which is our 5th year working with the WSL. Football being the biggest game, WSL becomes the biggest women's sporting right. It's all part of that narrative and all part of us becoming, the leader of women's sport. I think what we've tried to do, it's interesting, earlier I talked about the 3 o'clock blackout. There was an Article 48. There was a lot of noise in the women's game around women's matches being at 3 o'clock on a Saturday. That hasn't happened. And the reason why that was talked about was because what is the best slot for women's football? Yeah. So when we acquired the rights, the football calendar, as we talked about, with so many more live games, is a very congested space. So we were placing matches at 6:45 on a Sunday after Super Sunday to inherit a big audience to talk about the women's game. And it was relatively successful from a viewing point of view, but it wasn't great for attendances. Yeah. So what we've had to do, and what we want to always try to be, is the best partner for sport, is sit down with the league and talk to them around what we think we can do together to better the sport from a broadcasting perspective and from a fan and league perspective. So what we've ended up doing is doing a deal, and WSL have done similar to what the EFL have done in more inventory, in fact all their inventory. 118 games on Sky out of the 132, 90% of all WSL games. But what we wanted to try to do was get a dedicated slot. So midday Sunday, obviously leading up to our Premier League in the afternoon, but midday Sunday, we will have a live front channel, either first pick or second or third pick, however the picks process worked that week. Have a live game at 12 o'clock. Then the games that aren't picked live will then be displaced, a bit like the 2 o'clocks, as often as they can to 12 o'clock on a Sunday. So what we've then got is a programme where we're not just talking about 1 game and 2 WSL clubs. We're talking about 3 games or 4 games and 6 and 8 WSL clubs. So the narrative becomes much more wider, and we can talk about all the clubs rather than just focusing on a couple. We can tell the stories from around the grounds, we can tell the stories that show the best moments, and we can tell the stories of some of the players as well. So what we're planning there is a is a new program at 11 o'clock, building up to the 12 o'clocks, again, with a social element to it. We think that the growth audience is in from the social side, from the younger generation. How can we best get young female football fans or young fans watching the women's game? So there'll be a social element to that. There'll be a new change of tone and approach. There'll be a new set as well. So all this stuff we'll talk about this in the coming weeks. But that's the plan around WSL. Massively important for us. Unbelievable opportunity off the back of the brilliant success of the Lionesses. That couldn't have happened at a better time for the women's game, for the WSL, for Sky Sports as well, in terms of the narrative and the talkability. Everyone was talking about, and still is talking about, the Lionesses' success. It's brilliant. So yeah, we're really looking forward to that, and we hope that midday narrative will continue and be an appointment to view slot for women's football.
Absolutely. And the big number is the amount of EFL matches that are going to be displayed, and that's through Sky Sports Plus, which
Correct.
Is largely a streaming platform. So out of curiosity, just what that means for Sky, and then at the same time, were there any learnings you took just from the habits of people from a consuming perspective? Because I think one of the important stats that was mentioned was every team at minimum is going to have 20 games, which again talks about the value and security for fans that you're not going to pay for a subscription that isn't going to speak to you. It's something that everyone's going to have their moment in the sun, I guess you sort of say. Just sort of what you've learned from that and kind of the scale of those operations, because there aren't small numbers.
Yeah, it's huge. And as I said, I think there's 1,881 EFL games, of which we show 1,100 of them. And I think that's what we did last season. And I think that unlock of saying to customers and to fans that they can watch their team at least 20 times a season was huge. And it was a huge undertaking internally with the EFL and with the production partner IMG as well, who deliver the bulk of those games on streams. And we've got, this is on the Tuesday, we've got 30 Carabao Cup games that are being streamed on Sky Sports Plus tonight. But that was a huge unlock, Sky Sports Plus, for not just the EFL, but I think for all sporting rights, because it gives you the long tail, it gives you a platform. And that's where some of the WSL games will be going. It gives you that platform for the long tail to be seen and to get a platform, basically. So the learnings were huge operational, huge technical, a whole new streaming platform. We clearly have our front games. And again, it's about promoting that appointment to view slot, 12:30 on a Saturday. For us to have 7 EFL games available, Championship 3 there, League 1 2, League 2 2, to have that narrative of talk about the whole league. And I think the EFL deal as well, it meant that we were talking more about League 1 and 2. Obviously the Championship is massively high profile, some big clubs in there, but some big clubs in League 1 and 2 as well. So we doubled our inventory from I think 19-20 games to 38 in League 1 and 2 front channel games, but then you've got so many more available as well. So again, that was a huge unlock, and I think the learnings there were some teething problems. There's always going to be some teething problems when you've got, you're going to every ground every week, and you've got 2 cameras, 4 cameras, a streaming setup, broadband connectivity. It was huge, but that was ironed out very quickly. If there were some issues at the time, I think the platform is very robust, and fingers crossed, touch wood, it's very robust. It stood up to the first couple of weeks of the EFL season, and hopefully it will do this Tuesday night with the 30 games as well and throughout the season. But no, I think that has been Sky Sports Plus has been brilliant for tennis as well. For rugby league, all Super League, all our long tail rights, they've got huge volumes, and it's great for the customer.
The last topic I want to go to is speaking about the customer, so perfect timing. One of the things is sort of what are kind of the new features, things that you are doing particularly to serve the super fan. And I think one of the things that popped up to me that caught my eye, I'm an NFL fan, shocking with the American accent. I think NFL Red Zone is one of the best packages that exist. And you guys referenced the multi-view that's going to come not just on Super Sunday, but you guys called it Super Size Sunday.
Super Sunday,
that feels like something that's new. Maybe just talk about the development of that Sunday offering and what that means for super serving, football fans.
Yeah. So listen, I totally agree with you. Red Zone is brilliant. It's a fantastic watch. I think American football's a little bit easier to do a red zone of time because there's breaks in play. You know where you know where the play is going to be. You know if they're in the end zone. You know where in the red zone. You know that's going to happen. Football is obviously a lot more unpredictable. But what the premise is behind multi-view is a new viewing option, simultaneous games. We will be in editorial control of what we put front and centre in the big screen, with the other games happening on the right-hand side. We'll jump in and out like red zone of when we think there's like be a corner or a free kick. We'll make sure all the goals are seen, all key moments. And again, that is just how we're trying to evolve our offering, customer experience. They can all watch their individual games on separate channels, but if they want to watch all four at once, and if you're a Super Sunday junkie and you want to watch everything like that all in one place, that's your place to go. Again, it's something new, it's something different. We will do it on those supersized Super Sundays. We'll do it when we've got simultaneous games in midweeks. We'll also look to do it as well around some of our other football. And I think we're always constantly looking to evolve and to innovate. It's been at the heart of what Sky Sports is all about how we can better serve our customers. And that is an example of how we intend to do that next season. So we're very excited by that, and anything that's anywhere close to being as good as the Red Zone we'll definitely take.
Yeah, well, Gary, I appreciate the conversation, and particularly you taking the time, given the season is kicking off shortly. But you've already said that there's 30 Carabao Cup games tonight. So while some people might be focused on the Premier League Friday, work has already started here at Sky Sports on the new season.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We kicked off 2 weeks ago with League 1 and 2. The Championship kicked off last weekend. We've had Scotland. We did our WSL start of season shoot yesterday. We've done our media day today. There's so much going on, but there's no better place I'd want to be. We love it here, and we're looking forward to a brilliant season ahead.
Awesome. I really appreciate it, Gary.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.